Hey friends and family, my name is Skylent and you know I love MMOs. You know what I really like most about MMOs is finding some new ones and having new experiences. And guess what guys, I made a whole list based on that concept. This is going to be the top 10 most innovative MMOs. So if you are interested in playing a new game and you do want a new experience, then these are probably your best bets. They're not going to be for everybody. All these games are wildly different, but that's the point, is each of these games does something different, or maybe many things very differently, and it's going to be overall a very new and magical time for you if you are a new player to MMOs, or even if you are a veteran and you've kind of bypassed these games. I promise you, try them out, you at least won't be wasting your time. Alright, so let's do this. Top 10 most innovative MMO. Alright, first on the list we have ArcheAge. Now, ArcheAge could have been the most popular MMO in the world. In my honest opinion, I think that a lot of people think that this game could have been giant. And actually, it still is one of the most popular games out there. It's a great free-to-play sandbox MMORPG that has a linear intro, so the game, it kind of seats you in nice and gently. You go in and you start out with one class, you pick up another class, and you pick up another class, and you kind of mix and merge 3 different classes to make your own true class. And it balloons out into a sandbox universe or world that you can actually explore. You have pirate ships and, you know, this open world warfare, and yes, it uses tab targeting, but with the class combination system, it's really tactical, it's really strategic, and there was a whole lot to this game with its economy and everything. It really could have been a fantastic, amazing fantasy sandbox MMO, but I think we all know really the detriment to the game, and that's going to be the pay-to-win aspect. But still, it's innovative, it is original, whether you love it or hate it, whatever, that's going to be for all of these games, whatever. Doesn't matter, ArcheAge still, as a whole, has something to offer for somebody. Next on the list, I have Dofus/Wakfu, and I always put these two together because they are extremely similar, made by the same people, and basically they almost look identical if you've never played them. Anyways, actually there is Dofus Touch on mobile devices, but Dofus and Wakfu are these like flash animated tactical MMOs, if that even makes sense. Really, I haven't played any other tactics MMOs proper. So you have this open world that you kind of go explore, and dungeons and bosses and whatever, and it kind of plays like a Final Fantasy Tactics game. You do have your one character though, and you have to work with other players in this sort of tactics universe, kind of in these mechanics. So the game is slower paced, and from my experience, just first impressions, it was actually kind of hardcore. Like it took a little bit to get into, so definitely niche, and of course with the art style and everything, and the gameplay itself, like normally most people would probably go play XCOM or Final Fantasy Tactics or some of the many tactics mobile games, or even Tactics CCG, but Dofus Wakfu is really the only tactics MMO, at least currently right now. I have seen some on Kickstarter, that is true. And also, the universe is pretty big. I mean, it has 2 games plus Dofus Touch, and it even has a anime. I mean, if you dare call it anime, it's French, but still, the universe is really, really big. There is some story, there is some charm, and it has really weird, again, tactical gameplay that you don't see in MMOs. Coming up next, we have Albion Online. Now, it's kind of debatable if it should be on this list, probably, in some of your minds, because it obviously pulls a lot from something like Ultima Online. There's other sandbox games coming out and also on this list, but what makes it really, really special is going to be the fact that it's cross-platform, and properly at that, with mobile devices. And this game was really designed to be in that sort of cross-platform universe. Like, it really does control kind of well on both, and it looks really good on PC, it looks fine on mobile devices. Of course, it still has some development to go, it's still not fully released, but it's coming up pretty soon. In fact, by the time you watch this video, statistically, you probably, you already played Albion Online, or at least it's out now. So Albion also is really special to me because it's kind of the spearhead for a new trending genre, such as like MMOBA, if that makes sense. It feels like a MOBA, and I don't just mean because it's isometric, but many of its abilities are pulled straight from MOBA inspirations. Even its guild versus guild, the most intense and competitive form of combat in this game, isn't Zerg-based, it's actually 5v5 set in instances there. And there is open world ganking and stuff like that, but the overall open world also kind of feels MOBA inspired with its design. Very interesting overall how this game is really kind of forming itself to be a very mechanical and hardcore game, but also made for mobile devices, which generally those games are kind of the opposite of that. So absolutely, while it pulls from a lot of different games, such as, you know, even the developers citing that it's a Fantasy EVE Online, I still think that the direction that the game is going in is very original. And next on the list, we have Guild Wars 2. Now, if you follow me, you probably know that Guild Wars 2 is my most played MMO to date at the moment. And it's because mainly of the base content, as well as mostly like jumping puzzles and the living story and all the casual stuff in GW2. I think that's really the epitome of what this game has to offer. Now, if you're not into weird gimmicks like that, if you don't want to do the seasonal events, if you don't want to do jumping puzzles, if you don't just want to explore, or do the campaign, or do the story, the episodic story that they keep adding on, then, I don't know, it's maybe not for you, but they are adding in rating, and the dungeons do have a nice taste of difficulty as you are leveling, but a lot of people kind of come into this and they just kind of grind hearts, or they just kind of do just one thing, they're just doing the single-player campaign. But the thing is Guild Wars 2 is very well-rounded. Maybe it doesn't do the best of anything, but what it does actually, in my opinion, it does different than anybody else is going to be these seasonal events. It's going to be these jumping puzzles. It's going to do all the fun, casual stuff, these mini-games. Actually, I would probably consider Guild Wars 2 one of the best mini-game MMOs out there, even though a lot of people approach it as if it's going to be something like World of Warcraft or Terra or WildStar. Guild Wars 2 is actually significantly more focused on just kind of explosive, colorful fun. Yeah, it has a really hardcore PvP scene, absolutely it does, and now it's adding in ratings with the expansion. But really, Guild Wars 2 is something like a one-shot kind of game. It's really a theme park. You go in, you do these things, you kill these giant bosses in these giant open-world battles, which I think are better than any other game. You do these jumping puzzles once, you get the achievements, you do the Easter egg hunts, you do all these little mini-games, you do it one and done, and what's great, no subscription fee, okay? You can just jump in whenever you want to. And that's what you're supposed to do. Every season, every update, come back in, have some fun, and you're G to G. Okay, friends and family, moving on from that, we have RuneScape. Now, everybody knows about RuneScape, but a lot of people don't realize why RuneScape is so good. They just see it's popular on Twitch, they see that there's a lot of YouTube videos on it, and they see that it's old. Well, I'm gonna actually put RuneScape Old School as well as RuneScape 3 on this list, mainly and focused on the questing. I think RuneScape quests are not only the best, but I think they're done in such an original way that no other game is really gonna come close until they essentially mimic it exactly. See, RuneScape quests are done individually, where in other games, yeah, I mean, there's individual quest lines, and there are individual quests that might be kind of interesting or good or cinematic, such as the starting zones in World of Warcraft, and such as some other stuff in Guild Wars 2 as well with the single-player campaign. But RuneScape's quests are really designed in such a way to really make you think, and a lot of the times you have to be very collaborative, and a lot of times, honestly, they're just frankly good, okay? Now, also, there's many hardcore aspects to RuneScape. Really, RuneScape is kind of half theme park, as in one and done, you do these quests, you move through it, you grind, you level up, but it's also half sandbox as well, with the PvP. Also, if you die, it's kind of hardcore. So yeah, it looks kind of cute and childish and blocky and colorful, but actually, no, yeah, if you die, you lose a bunch of shit. So it's pretty intense when it comes to that. And overall, a lot of people still enjoy RuneScape because, frankly, it just does a whole lot of things, a whole suite of mechanics that are simply not used in modern MMOs. And a lot of the times, it's clunky, it's slow. Yes, it kind of can look very blocky and old school, obviously, but there is still some specialness to be had, even if you are a completely new player. So what I would do is, if you're totally new, I suggest RuneScape 3, and if you're nostalgic, maybe you played a little bit of it a long time ago, jump into old school RuneScape. They're still adding on tons of new content, and there is some specialness to still be digested. All right, making our way through the list here, we have Elder Scrolls Online. So Elder Scrolls, when it comes to every other modern MMO, really, I think, trumps with immersion. Obviously, it can be played in first person or third person, and it feels very reminiscent to, obviously, the Elder Scrolls titles as a whole. Now, you might come at this from two different points. If you've already played Elder Scrolls games, then maybe you'll feel off-put by the social and online features of this game, and if you already play a lot of MMOs, then you might feel very strange at how actual single-player these quests are designed. But in the end, no other MMO really tackles the game or the genre like this. It's very weird, okay? So a lot of the game is directed directly at the player. It is a very single-player experience, and yet at the same time, you see all these players running around, and some quest lines maybe don't make sense, but overall, because of that direction of the quest, and it's fully voice-acted, incredibly cinematic, and you do have a lot of dynamic events around the world, too, with these field bosses, and you do have, like, the freaking Oblivion portals opening up. You do have a lot of stuff that's happening around the world that makes it feel like an MMO, but at the same time, it's very directed at you, single-player, while still being in the open world, where other games like Guild Wars 2, they're gonna have single-player campaigns where you actually go into your own instances and you're not playing with everybody else. So while it can create a schism and a lot of people feel uncomfortable with it, it's still something that's very unique and interesting in terms of design. Also, the leveling with this game, you actually level individual abilities and you have mixing and matching of classes and roles and all that good stuff. There's a whole lot of uniquity to the game, but I really wanted to point out that what makes it very, very special in the MMO space is going to be its open cinematic questing that it has. And next on the list, we have Black Desert Online. And immediately, I'm just going to say it's the combat, pretty much. I mean, if you watch the trailers, if you're actually enticed by this game at all, it's most likely because, yo, dude, look at that combat. In fact, this game contends with action RPGs that aren't even online for most action-y action combat. I'm talking about like some Dynasty Warriors stuff, some, you know, some wuxia. It's really, like, literally explosive. You know, lightning and like these shadowy spells and all fire and little cannonballs, and it's craziness, man. The game is so mobile, so action-packed, and so combo-oriented, it just doesn't feel like an MMO. In a lot of ways, that's actually to a detriment because of the ping and latency and the frame rates, but dude, just, I mean, face value. Black Desert is huge. It's big. It just does the combat in MMOs the best. It's just the fastest paced and probably the most skill-oriented. But in the end, there's actually more things to Black Desert that make it special. You have the whole weird RPG mechanic with the conversation system. You can actually talk to NPCs and gain knowledge of different things, and that opens up different quests, and you can actually buy and sell at higher prices. And it's just a lot of weird RPG stuff. I actually put this on my top 10 RPG list too because of that, even though it's a sandbox game that doesn't really have a proper quest system or really proper RPG mechanics when it comes to usual RPGs. But then also it has like this weird economy system where you can have workers, and you kind of have this node empire, you connect different cities to each other, and you have like this trading routes, and then actually you can literally trade. You can just, if you want to, you can just go back and forth from cities and trade and trade. And yes, it's a sandbox game, and so there's going to be a plethora of things that you can do. But what I'm saying is, even though the things that you do in Black Desert aren't exactly original, the way it feels and the way you go about it is original, it is innovative, and also it kind of just looks freaking gorgeous, and that's probably why it's one of the most popular, if not the most popular, sandbox MMO right now. Right, but on a word about sandbox, if Trove even really counts, it's really more of like a sand park, or I guess kind of like a theme box, if that makes sense. So Trove is like, I mean, it looks like Minecraft, but really it is significantly more action-packed. And it has so many weird and silly classes, and I've put Trove on so many top 10s, especially like casual top 10s or top 10, like MMO for noobs, and you know, stuff like that. It's really easy to just jump in and play with the whole family. But it does have a layer of difficulty to it, at least when I played back in the day. If you want to go to the end game and do those shadow arenas and really push yourself, you know, how far can you grind, you know, how fast and furious can you go, you know, stuff like that. You can actually push yourself with this game. And also the creativity, because you do actually kind of like, you make your own little house that you can spawn on the map, which is really cute, but you also make your own islands, you can make your own mini games and stuff like that. And there is PvP in the game now, and I don't know, there's a wealth of things that you can do, and immediately as soon as you jump into the game, you're greeted with this, you know, really cute and colorful and yes, boxy art style. It's really easy to jump into. You can just jump right into the PvP. Immediately, like, you learn all the abilities of your class in like less than 30 minutes. Like, it's really easy to jump into. And so for that reason, because it's one of the most casual and just fast games, it's just most intuitive games to just jump into, you know, fun for the whole family, absolutely I wanted to put it on the list. Not just because its art style is kind of different for MMOs, but a lot of the stuff that it does is just really, really friendly. But aside from its aesthetic, the mechanical thing that really separates it is the overall 3D-ness of the world and the platforming as well. And you might actually see that from the gameplay, but it's not all just combat exactly. There's also a lot of platforming and a tremendous amount of 3D movement and climbing and soaring that you'll be doing in Trove, which gives it a very original feeling. Next on the list, we have another very 3D shooter MMO, and that's going to be PlanetSide 2. So this game, you got classes, you got equips, you got vehicles, it's a big team battle, you got different bases, you got objectives you got to take. It sounds like Battlefield, except that instead of 64 players inside an instance in a lobby, it's hundreds versus hundreds, you know, actual faction versus faction versus faction, you know, inside these giant continents, inside these giant bases. And really, the game is just so action-packed, absolutely. This is, I think, the only true MMO FPS, the one that actually qualifies as a proper FPS and a proper MMO at the same time. And if you've ever tried using these vehicles or strategizing with like a team or a guild or a clan or whatever, and you actually go in and you commit to certain actions, you know, plans and strategies and tactics, this game gets really in-depth. Now, I will admit that the shooting mechanics, the ping, and some of the graphics, overall the aesthetic, it kind of looks a little bit rough and harsh in ways, and it feels a little bit rough. But in terms of the MMO scale combat, that's also FPS, or, you know, even regardless, there's really rarely any games that is just fully PvP in your face. It really feels like you versus the world, but try to get some friends along the way. And now our number one is going to be EVE Online for incredibly obvious reasons. How many other space games do we have to this caliber that actually is this hardcore, that is this sandbox, like literally a universe. And this game actually broke world records for numbers of people inside a single battle. Yeah, you actually just hear stories on literally news sites talking about these giant, massive battles, these things that are historic. They're literally historic moments in real life and also inside the game universe. EVE Online is truly massive. It truly earns the title of MMO. And it actually directly inspired many sandbox games right now, even on this list, and also coming out. Obviously not aesthetically, because most of them are fantasy-based, but looking at the economy and how that plays in the actual true sandbox elements of the game, you know, allowing for people to be bounty hunters and stuff like that. Like actually adding in those social elements, they're inspired by EVE Online. It absolutely is slower paced. It's really focused on like crunching numbers and also the social dynamic. I mean, if you can have like literal politics in this game and have like thousands of dollars worth of like damage from conflicts, things get really serious and you definitely take your time with making decisions. But if you really want that very serious, very hardcore, literal universal scale sandbox experience, EVE Online is where you get it. Alright, that's the end of the top 10, but there are a suite of new games, actually, that are looking very original, very different. I can give you some honorable mentions here. We have a 2D sort of programming. It's a real-time strategy MMO, and it's like really the only RTS MMO. It's called Skylent. Really different, really strange. Also, yeah, the new Darkfall game is looking pretty good, too. Now, Darkfall, I know there's been a couple of them previously, and then there's also competitors like Mortal Online. You could even say, like, Elder Scrolls, in a way, competes with it. There's been some other hardcore-ish kind of first-person games. Gloria Victus on the horizon, but I think right now I guess we could just spotlight, you know, Darkfall is also pretty original, got some pretty cool stuff going on with it. As well, another honorable mention was my number 1 on my 2D MMO list is a game called Starbreak. Now, some people debated if it's really an MMO, but when it comes to 2D, you know, self-proclaimed MMOs, this is the most social and it allows for the most amount of players in the game with open dungeons, so it is the most closely resembling of an MMO, and so that's why I wanted to mention Starbreak. And there's lots of other MMOs that are very traditional, but they do some things very differently, such as Final Fantasy XIV with its very heavily like story focus too. So let me know what you guys think, your thoughts and feelings, and I know there's tons of games coming out that are really weird, way radical, and I can't wait to talk about them. We might even redo this list specifically for just upcoming games. Let me know your thoughts and feelings below, guys. I hope you had fun. My name's Skylent, and I'll see you in the next one.